Hello, everybody, and welcome to Web and Beyond Live for October 18th, 2021. I'm Ray Sidney Smith, president of W3 Consulting and managing director of W3C Web Services, which provides affordable web and WordPress hosting, domain name registration, and other web-related services for small business. Web and Beyond Live is our weekly show about topical and timely small business, digital marketing, and related issues. Whether you're watching live or the replay or listening to the podcast afterward, feel free to ask questions in the chat in the comment section, and I'll do my best to answer them. And you can always tweet at us at W3 Consulting, the number 3 Consulting on Twitter as well. And so, of course, today I am going to be talking about honoring female-led small businesses. And to do that today, I have brought a special guest, Laura Hatcher. Laura is a photographer, and she's the owner of Laura Hatcher Photography, which is a veteran-owned small business serving the Northern Virginia and DC metro area with unique photographic support to local community/nonprofit events, small businesses, military ceremonies, professional headshots, and drone operations. Fun. And so with that, let me bring Laura onto the show. Welcome, Laura.
Good morning, Ray. How are you?
Oh, doing really well. And I'm so glad that you could join me here this morning for Web and Beyond Live. And so, of course, I couldn't have encapsulated everything about you in just those few words about you. Can you tell folks a little bit about your background, both as a Navy veteran and as kind of the journey you took to small business ownership?
Okay, I'll try and give you the short version because it's 31 years of being a veteran. So that would completely exceed your 30-minute show.
Yeah, we only have 30 minutes, so.
So I retired in 2018, but before I retired, I started a hobby in photography around 2015. I went to a local class here at the Torpedo Factory in Old Town Alexandria. And just fell in love with it and really enjoyed it. Built my portfolio while I was on active duty. And then when I retired in 2018, I went and got a real job for about a year. And then after that year, I realized I could actually take my hobby and turn it into my jobby and do something that is more flexible for me and my family. I have 3 sons and a husband and a dog and a stepdaughter, and family on the West Coast, family on the East Coast, and working for yourself affords that flexibility to fit all of that into. And let's face it, as I like to say, my pension helped fulfill my passion, and so things like healthcare and having a little bit of income from my military pension definitely supported me going into business for myself.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think it's just really good for people to understand this. And you've got some really fun passions in the photographic space. Cars. I've seen lots of car shows where you've done, shows, photographs showing those particular cars. You do a lot of military ceremonies showing retired veterans or retiring veterans at their ceremonies, and that's the pomp and circumstance and the beautiful photography that happens at those ceremonies are quite unique and interesting. Something that I didn't even know occurred until you came into my world and started showing me them in your social profiles. So really, some fascinating subjects for you to photograph, and I'm curious what piques your interest in terms of photography, in terms of the things that you want to take photographs of versus the things that pay the bills and kind of make you money in that sense.
Yeah, that's a great question because I do get a lot of photographers that say, "Hey, I want to be just like you." And I'm like, well, I think we all start in the same place where we pick up the camera, we take some landscapes. In my case, I took pictures of cars, and let's face it, it doesn't pay the bills, or at least it doesn't buy better cameras. I found out because people who own those exotic cars or those classic cars only want to see pictures of their car. They're not buying pictures of anybody else's car. And so I had to get very comfortable with solving a problem. And as you know, as a business consultant, as a business person, your product, your service should be solving someone's problem. And it's even more unique if you can figure out how to solve the problem without them realizing they have the problem. So in my case, my niche, I like to say, found me. I was struggling with my military transition, trying to find my footing as a civilian. And when I went back to the community that I grew up with and helped solve their problem, and that problem, if you will, is I'm leaving the military. I have to get on LinkedIn. I have to get a job. I have to show myself in a foreign outfit, right? Because we wear a uniform our entire lives. And now you're telling me I have to find some fashion sense and look good on film, something other than sitting straight up in front of the camera, because that's the way the military poses us. That to me was a solution. And once I tapped into that, and word of mouth, veterans love to support veterans. And it was just been a very unique ride for me, especially since most of my chain of command, all the people I used to work for, have many of them have walked through my doors at the studio.
Fantastic, and it would be malpractice for me to note, not to note, that is, that you actually took my headshot, my most recent headshot, and most likely my forthcoming headshot, because there is probably another one to come soon. But yeah, so in I guess it's about 2 years ago now, even
Yes,
maybe a
you are
little.
due. Thanks for bringing
Yeah.
that up.
Well, the sad part is that I had gone many many years without a headshot because, well, with my old headshot, because I had gone through several photographers who I just really didn't ultimately like the photography, and it wasn't the photographers that, I don't place any blame on them. It's just at that time of my life, in that particular period, I was in a lot of kind of visual transition, so to speak, and I just decided that I didn't like the new ones that were taken. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me in your studio in Old Town Alexandria and taking those photographs, so that I could have a new one for all of my various work. So
That's the nice version, Ray. You do realize that I was picking on you in message saying, "Hey, that picture really looks horrible. Let's do something with that."
yes, yes, I know, but I'm taking the good side here. I don't want to mar uh, either of us in that. But no, I think it's good for people to recognize that people notice what you look like, and when your digital marketing is and you are usually the first thing people see in your digital marketing, it's really important to make a good first impression in that sense. And so, of course, we're here because it is National Women's Small Business Month, and I wanted to have you on to talk a little bit about your experience, your lived experience, as well as just talking a little bit about those things. National Women's Small Business Month was actually championed by the National Women's Business Council, which is actually a program, kind of an area that is a part of the White House administration, kind of the president's administration. But it's a cause for celebration because of the Women's Business Ownership Act. Up until the enactment of the law, this was in 1988, it was unlawful for women in some states to sign a business loan without a male relative's consent. So every October, we celebrate female-led small businesses. And it's just remarkable that, in that time frame, you go from probably 1970-ish to today, where you had about less than 500,000 small businesses owned by women, to today, where we have approximately 30 to 40% of businesses now female led. And I think that's a testament to good legislation, but also societal change as well. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the fun statistics about women led or female led small businesses or entrepreneurial ventures. And we had talked beforehand about some of those. What are some fun stats that we can share with folks about female led or women led owned businesses?
Yeah, so you just touched on one of them, that 40% of US businesses are owned by women. But what I found fascinating is that we've contributed to $1.8 trillion a year. And I did a little bit of research because that's what retired Intel officers do. They always prepare for their audience. And I was curious to know, out of the 1.9 million female veterans that we have across the United States and all the territories, only 15% of us, about 15.2%, according to the VA, are actually in business. And so for me, that means we can probably do better in getting the word out. Many military members, male and female, were conditioned to go back into corporate America. And what we don't realize, and I've learned this myself, is that we were actually given skill sets throughout our entire military career, whether it was 1 year or 31 years like me. We've been given those skill sets to be successful in the business space, whether it's strategic thinking, it's leadership, managing, customer service, service in general, right? Service to the country is the highest order. And so a lot of military members or veterans don't think that way.
Yeah, I think that's a really stark statistic, and it's something that, you see all of the discussion, at least for those of us who have lived in and around military areas, or the DC metro area, where you have a lot of military officers and veterans in transition. There's all this discussion about how to help those veterans transition into civilian life. And in my world of economic development, you see people talking about how to get them to start businesses, and that there's such a large gap between those that are in, the male, veterans leaving and starting businesses versus female. Clearly there's an area of opportunity there. And so all of you female veterans, listen up, listen to Laura. So okay, so I wanted to talk about what I mean, when we think about, and I know this can become and sound sometimes obtuse, but I really wanted to talk about the advantages that female small business owners have over their male counterparts. And it's not like a male versus female, but just from a perspective of, from your perspective, what do you feel like is and are the things that you bring to the table as a woman, a mother of three sons, those kinds of things, your experiences as a veteran, a female veteran, right? Because that's a whole other layer of experience. What do you feel like are the things that help prepare you for small business ownership?
Okay, so first I neglected to thank you for having me on, and I want to circle back to that because by you having me on, you forced me to actually dig deep into this subject area because as a female veteran, I don't understand the space I'm in as a female civilian businesswoman now. So I'm very new to this, as you know. I've been doing this full time for about 2 years. So I really wasn't cognizant of many of the challenges. And so this has been a great enlightenment for me, educational. And I think it's going to help make me a better mentor as well going forward for female business people, or even male for that matter. And I did some research because I always research. And I will tell you, I came across an article, and I was completely floored and offended by the six advantages that the male writer said female entrepreneurs had. And I'll list them quickly because they just blew my mind. One was social networking, because we don't give the social calendar to the man, which I thought was a very sexist comment to say. The other advantage is that we have women's intuition. That's not a thing, okay? That this is the one that got my goat. Pain tolerance. We have a high threshold, and the author said, after watching my wife give birth, I know they have a high pain tolerance. What does that have to do with being a businesswoman? I was shuddering. Multitasking, patience, and that we're good listeners. Okay, that's all crap. And if the article hadn't been old, I think it was like 2017, I would have written a comment saying that was all crap. From my experience, what I have found is that we take, as women, we take calculated risks. We're more risk adverse. At least I know I am personally. I tend to think things out and maybe even overthink to the point where I don't make decisions quickly. And we've talked about this in the past, Ray, when I'm paralyzed by my own analysis. I think we are better at asking for advice. Women tend to help each other with lessons learned. We're more open to talking about our failures than men are. I found that when I want to learn lessons, for example, the studio that I own today was owned by another woman, photographer. Her name's Katie Garlock. And I walked in off the street like 4 or 5 years ago now, and I said, hey, I need a mentor. I looked around and I said, you obviously know what you're doing because you've got a studio in Old Town Alexandria. And she agreed. And I just don't see many men doing that. And I will tell you, I love mentoring. I love mentoring men and women, but women tend to help each other more than the other way around. I also noticed that we are less prone to be overconfident. And this was me growing up in the military. I wanted to make sure that I knew everything 100%, as opposed to my male counterparts that would walk in and maybe know 40%, but they were way more confident expressing that I could do that, even though they had no clue what they were doing. Where I was walk in and say, yeah, I have no clue. And yet I was at 99%. I just needed that 1% to make me feel like I knew what was going on. So
So if we take that to the flip side, then what do you feel like are the things that still hold women small business owners back? What are the disadvantages or the challenges that you face being a female-led venture?
All right, so I learned a new term, doing my homework for you. You may or may not have heard of it. Homophily, Homophily. Feel like I'm in a spelling bee. Homophily. What does it mean? Do you know what it means, Ray? No, I want to put you on the
Uh,
spot.
well, so if I take the Greek or Latin, it means to it would be the same
Yeah.
of
So
something.
yeah, so homophily is it's actually neat. It's the tendency for people to seek out others similar to themselves.
Mm,
And so, from what I read, and this makes a lot of sense, I've seen this through my career, not necessarily as a businesswoman, but women tend to be outside those organized networks that are usually male dominated, right? And men or people with experience tend to mentor people like themselves. And those people that are mentoring usually have the financing, usually are the ones that are sponsoring and elevating people to find those opportunities. And so if all the men are mentoring people that look and sound like themselves, then where is the room for women to find those opportunities? And that is so true. Growing up in the military, there weren't a lot of women, especially uh, for me, that looked like me, that wanted to have children, that wanted to balance everything. And I remember very early in my career, I said, I'm going to do it all. I'm going to have kids. I'm going to stay in to the bitter end. I'm going to, at the time, I may not have actually thought this, but I know looking back, I wanted to be what I didn't see for myself in the military. And so in the business place, I think it's important for when you do reach a point where you're successful or at least have a clue what's going on, it's time to give back. It's time to pay it forward and let other female veterans, in my case, photographers, see that you can do it. All right, give them the lessons learned. Cut some of that time and that anxiety and those challenges out by telling them all the mistakes that you made, so they can avoid that and be successful.
Yeah, I certainly know that there's still a bit of an old boys club regarding old gentlemen's club, whatever you want to call it. There's still a lot of that happens in a lot of business communications and interactions that I have, and it does require, if there are any men watching or listening, it does require us to stand up and say that's not acceptable in those environments. I hear it all the time, and have to be that person where it says, like, why are we not using more inclusive language? Why are we not
Right,
letting why are we letting these kinds of interactions, and they seem kind of passing. They seem so innocent in essence. It's the locker room talk kind of excuses that have been given in the past, and we all need to stand up because we're all better when we're all equal.
right,
And it makes it incumbent upon everyone, not just women, to have to overcome the challenges, but men to actually step up and support women led businesses. And I feel like, and I hope that I emulate that and model that for my other male led business owners and male colleagues, because it's really important for us to understand that we're actually better off when we are supporting women led businesses. They tend to crowdfund more. They tend to pay back their loans at a higher rate. They are folks who show up and do the work. And like I was saying to you pre-show, most of my client base are female led businesses, and it's just the nature of my business. Just the nature of my personality. We quipped that it might be my headshot.
go ahead.
uh, yeah, exactly, right? It's all in the headshot. But the goal behind my work is not gendered, but the way in which we do our work just lends toward females feeling like they can trust me to do the work, trust us to do the work. And that's really important for me. And I feel like it's really important for us all to take to heart. Moving right along, I wanted to talk a little bit about what are, in your process of starting your business, you had a little bit of a transition buffer, so to speak. You talked about the fact that you had your military pension and those kinds of things to help you with that transition. What are some of the things that you think about when it comes to, they use the term fempreneur. I'm not quite sure I particularly like that term, but it is what is out there. But like female entrepreneurs starting their businesses in especially this climate where we are doing more virtually, we see the economic kind of recovery happening, and we also see pandemic culture setting into place. These are all areas where some of the advantages you talked about as of being a female small business owner kind of come into place. What are some of the things that fempreneurs can do as they're starting their businesses?
So I mentioned it earlier. It worked for me, and I think it would work for anyone that has the who really wants to get better at what they're doing. Is finding mentors, mentors and sponsors, right? Because there's a difference between the two. But you know, part of that challenge though is finding people that are willing participants, right? Obviously I took a risk though. Katie could have said, get out of my shop, I don't have time for you. But she's a wonderful person, so she didn't. But I think we need to find a way, the business community, to offer it so that it's not, there isn't that bridge or that awkwardness. And there are a lot of programs and resources that are out there. Score is a great one, where you can go online and read people's bios and backgrounds and what their industries are to help you. And I've used them a couple of times for accounting, for example, which is the bane of my existence. But I think if we can, connect, struggling or aspiring fempreneurs. I don't like that term either, but
I
it
know.
almost sounds like a superhero title. I'm
Yeah,
the
yeah, it's weird. It's
fempreneur.
weird.
But if you can connect them to people that that will help them, guide them through, because we don't know what we don't know, right? I'm actually currently writing a curriculum to help uh, aspiring photography business owners. I'm working with a local photography school. We've agreed that this is kind of a need. And as I'm writing this curriculum, I'm realizing, oh my goodness, um, uh, there's so much that I missed, right? There's so many things that there's actually a process. And had I had someone sit down and say, hey, before, I'm sorry, the sun disappeared. That's why I got so dark. um, if I had actually had a mentor from the beginning saying, "Oh, you want to go into business? Let's walk you through this process," that would have been so much more helpful. Because as I'm writing this curriculum, I'm like, "Oh, I didn't do this step. I didn't do this step."
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so if and I noted in the chat here, but for anybody who's listening after the fact, Laura noted Score, but there's also a platform called Micromentor. If you go to micromentor.org and then businessadvising.org, they're run by Pacific Community Ventures. And I am actually one of the Pacific Community Ventures business advisors. And so I'm in that business mentoring program, and that is as a mentor. And so they pair you up usually geographically. But many times it's based on what your needs are. So, similar to Score, where you might look at different profiles and choose someone based on their skill set, businessadvising.org basically chooses your mentor for you based on your needs in that particular area. And so just something to consider there. In terms of places where people can go for assistance, I frequently recommend to people to go to their local small business development center. And if you go to americassbdc.org, they actually have a map and a search. You just type in your zip code, and wherever you have your business or wherever you live, you can find a local small business development center. But even further beyond that, so the SBDC, or the Small Business Development Center program, is a program of the SBA. And the SBA also has something called the Women's Business Center. The WBCs, there are 100 centers throughout the country, and those 100 centers have their own set of services and provisions for women's small businesses, basically women-led small businesses. What other resources have you come across, Laura, that you feel like are good places for women-led businesses to go to?
So I always send everybody to the SBDC. That's perfect, and I knew that because that's where I met you. On the veteran side, there's a wealth of free resources. There's a program called VWise, Veteran Women Inspiring. and I apologize, I should know this. It's a long acronym, but it's for women entrepreneurs, VWise. It's a great program under the University of Syracuse. University of Syracuse also has quite a few programs for men and women for veterans that want to get into the entrepreneurial space. But the ones that you mentioned, I think, are the key ones where you'll find, webinars and resources and blog posts, and it's just a lot of information out there that is for free.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
posted a link. Yeah,
Women igniting the spirit of entrepreneurship.
yeah, that's a mouthful. So
It
I
is.
posted a link to that into the chat, and I'll make sure to put that into our video description and into the show notes. And I would also note there is Hello Alice for anyone who's not used Hello Alice, but that's a really great platform for just learning about funding and entrepreneurship generally, but usually very, very helpful in the women-led small business arena. And as we come to kind of the end of our conversation, I wanted to talk about what we can do to support more female entrepreneurship. And what do you feel are the things that both female business owners as well as their male counterparts can do to support female entrepreneurship beyond going to one of these centers? What can we each maybe individually do? What are some ideas that you might have there?
So Ray, I think you're doing it right. You're an example of what we're doing right now. We're advocating for women. We're interviewing them. We're educating. You're raising awareness. I mean, just in this short period of time, getting ready for this, you've actually educated me, and I'm going to pay it forward. And then that next person that receives that information from me, they're going to share it with someone else. If we're all doing that small part, that's going to change the way that we view and we'll start to use these resources that I think are underutilized right now.
Absolutely. I think the other side to this is be uncomfortable. And, it's really, it's like, it's weird to kind of think about it from that perspective. But really, for me, I don't think about my gender all that often. I am a cisgender male. I'm 6'2". I'm for all intents and purposes white to everybody, although I am multi-ethnic. And so I walk around the world without a perception of people thinking about those things about me. And so when you address these issues, it can be uncomfortable, and
Right.
it requires that discomfort, just leaning into the discomfort to say, you know what, I'm going to fumble over my thoughts. I'm going to not necessarily have the right thoughts. I could be open to change, and that change is for the better. It's for the better of society. It's for the better of my children. It's for the better for your children. It's for the betterment of everybody, and that has an economic impact that's actually positive on our national economy. And like if morality is not the point, let the dollars talk, right? And I really think that we forget the fact that when we positively impact female-led businesses, rising tides lift all ships. And that hopefully that Navy reference was not
Oh,
lost.
good. Good job. Go Navy.
We really need to make sure that we are recognizing that when we try to suppress or oppress other minorities, we ultimately hurt ourselves. It really is shooting ourselves in the foot. And so, or putting holes in our hull.
All right,
Really
now you
pushing it now. All right. So in closing, I wanted to talk just very, very briefly about what are some ways in which the folks who are watching and listening as business owners or business owners to be, how should we approach the female consumers? What should we do when it comes to being maybe a female-led business or not, but just how do we approach female consumers? What should we think just in kinds of rules of thumb?
I will tell you one thing that's worked for me as a photographer. I know nothing about fashion. Remember, I told you I wore a uniform for 31 years. I actually took the time to sit down and write an article about what looks best on camera in terms of clothes. And so I put myself in that female role of what are the things I care about and what are my hangups when I come and take a picture. And I will tell you, a lot of my female clients, when they read that article and they actually take my advice, pictures look so much better. And so it's really putting yourself, regardless of what your business is, in the shoes that you're trying to attract. Understand who your customer is, understand where they shop, what their concerns are, what their challenges are. And then your service or product, as I mentioned earlier, should solve a problem that they may not realize they already have.
Absolutely. I think the number one thing that at least male-led businesses can do is not patronize
Yeah.
female consumers. We've heard the term mansplaining. I see it all the time. I go to the store with my mother, and she's not only, she's Chinese ethnically, but this is a very smart woman who has had a very decorated career. She does not need to be talked down to or patronized in circumstances, but I just see the both racism and sexism kind of just latch on every time. And then when I step up to the counter, there's a different experience. And, there's a clear contrast. And so we can all just do better at not just ourselves embodying better skills in that sense, but also teaching those soft skills, those inclusive, DEI training, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility training for our staff as well is going to be really important as well. So I can't but hope that this message gets through to some folks and they can just start to do more in that sense. And so I really appreciate you having this conversation and joining me here, Laura. How can folks learn more about you and what you're doing out there in the world?
So I have a website, www, right there on the screen, laurahatcherphotography.com. It's a mouthful. I'm on 218 North Lee Street in Old Town Alexandria. I'm by appointment only, but you can find that on the website. I'm voracious on LinkedIn because I'm convinced that's where all the adults are, like Ray and myself. But I am on Instagram and Facebook too. So
It
I
was it
appreciate
was
your
sad
time.
that I didn't see you on Twitter, but LinkedIn is probably the best place for you.
It's
So
too much, Ray. There's only one of me.
I I totally understand. Well, again, I really want to appreciate. I want to send my gratitude and thank you for joining me here for Web and Beyond Live.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And I learned a lot, as usual,
Good,
when I
good.
hang out with you.
All right, everybody. That was Laura Hatcher from Laura Hatcher Photography, and you can, of course, check her out by going to her website at www.laurahatcherphotography.com. And with that, that brings us, of course, to the end of our time together this week. And so, if you have any questions, you have any comments, feel free to reach out to me at W3 Consulting on Twitter. Of course, you can reach us, through the comments or whatever other means. You can go to our website and communicate with us there. We will be back next week, Monday, as we normally are. We usually come live at 11 a.m. Eastern on Mondays talking about digital marketing. And so I think next week we're going to have a conversation around our social media small business updates. So we'll be covering all of the various social networking updates for that purpose. If you enjoy the live stream, feel free to click the thumbs up icon. Make sure you subscribe so that you get future notifications about future Web and Beyond lives, as well as all of our recorded webinars that come out here after the fact. They're usually about a month or so delayed from our live webinars, so it's best for you to attend the live ones, but then we do put out the archive versions here as well. So thanks so much for spending this Web and Beyond live with me. I'm Ray Sidney Smith on behalf of W3 Consulting and our subsidiary W3C Web Services. Have a great week ahead marketing your small business on the Web and Beyond.